Welcome everyone to lesson 2 of our IELTS key principles. And today we're going to focus on speaking. As ever, let me just check that the technology is working first before we begin. And if you can see me live and you can see the screen and you can hear me, please just let me know that you can see it and it's working okay. First before we begin. Excellent. So it's working on my phone, which probably means it's working for you guys. And if you are seeing the screen, which should say IELTS key principles speaking starting soon, just let me know in the comments that you can hear me and see me and everything. Genevieve says working perfectly. Thank you very much, Genevieve, for letting me know. Excellent. Okay, guys. So we will begin in about 3 minutes. Because this is a live lesson, I just like to come on a few minutes early so that everyone can get a notification from Facebook and everything. If you're watching the replay of this, you can just skip ahead 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then you'll be able to begin the lesson. But if you're watching live, just wait a few minutes and then we will begin. Okay, so yesterday, more than 11,000 of you watched lesson 1, which makes it the biggest IELTS class in the world. So you're all world record holders. So well done, everyone. It's very humbling to be able to help so many people all over the world and to teach 11,000 people all at the same time and to get really good feedback and for all of you to be happy with the lesson. It's a wonderful thing. So thank you very much for contributing yesterday, watching the lesson yesterday, and I hope that you get the same benefit out of this lesson today. Okay, so we'll begin in another, let's say, 2 minutes. Let me know where you're watching from. It's always interesting to see the different countries that we have. So let's see. Nairobi, Kenya. I was in Nairobi about 10 years ago. Pakistan, a lot of people from Pakistan today. Bangladesh, Malawi, welcome. UAE, Morocco. Excellent. A lot more African countries in the last sort of year or so, which is great to see. Iraq, Qatar. I've been to Qatar a few times, just passing through the airport mostly, but it's a very nice airport. And South Korea, Morocco again. Excellent. Okay, so 1 more minute and then we will begin. The number of people live keeps going up and up and up and up. Normally, Facebook takes a couple of minutes to notify everybody and let everybody know. Let's see, Kosovo, Malaysia, Cameroon, UAE again, Bangladesh again, India, Kerala. We have a few students from Kerala, mostly from the Punjab region, and most of our students are from there. UAE, Australia, Pakistan again. Excellent. Okay, guys, so about 1 more minute and then we'll begin. Mongolia, we have a lot of people from Mongolia who visit the site. Nigeria. When will you visit Nigeria? I have never been to Nigeria and I'd like to visit Africa again. But I have a lot of places. I want to stay at home here in Ireland for a while and focus on helping you guys before I go traveling again. Okay. Excellent. All right. So let's begin. So let's remind ourselves what we are doing this week. So yesterday, Monday, we focused on reading. So hopefully many of you learned a lot about reading and were able to do the task that I set. It's really important that you do those tasks and do the things that I suggested in that lesson. Just watching the lesson isn't going to help you, but if you take action and do the things that I suggested in the lesson, you're going to see big improvements. Today, we're going to focus on speaking, and tomorrow, we're going to help you with writing task 2. This is probably going to be the most important one, writing task 2, because that's the one that causes most people to fail. But speaking, Very, very, very important too. So what are we going to do in this lesson? Strategy for each part of the speaking test. So we're going to give you a strategy for part 1, part 2, and part 3. How to improve grammar, vocabulary, fluency and coherence, and pronunciation. So these are the 4 things that the examiner will be judging you on: grammar, vocabulary, fluency and coherence, and pronunciation. So we're going to show you how you can improve those 4 things. So if you improve those 4 things, you improve your score. And how to practice at home for free. Again, like reading, this information is useless unless you do something with it. So that's why there's no books on how to do press ups. If you want to do a press up, you have to actually do it. If you want to get better at speaking, you have to speak. But I'm not saying that you should just go and randomly speak. We're going to show you how to strategically practice and how to really improve every time you practice. So watch this lesson. It will help you, but then you need to take the information and then do something with it if you want to improve. Don't waste your time here. Make sure that you're doing something after these lessons to help you go and improve. So let's have a look at an overview of the actual speaking test. So there's 3 parts: part 1, part 2, and part 3. So it's important that you understand that each part is very different. Therefore, you need to approach each part differently. There's different strategies, there's different techniques, different types of questions, different lengths of answers, different types of questions and topics and things like that. So you shouldn't go into the test and just have the same approach and the same strategy. And you shouldn't practice each of these in the same way because they are different. Just like with the reading questions, there are, more than 10 different types of reading question. You need to have a different approach, different strategy for them. And then tomorrow, when we look at our task 2, there are 5 different types of essays. So we need to have a different approach, a different strategy for all of those. So let's look at some typical part 1 questions, part 2 questions, part 3 questions. So typical part 1 questions. Tell me about your hometown. What's the most interesting part of your town? Tell me about the home you live in. How long have you lived there? What do you like about living there? So you will see that these are just normal, everyday questions about you. They will ask you about your job, your studies, your hometown, the home that you live in, your likes and dislikes. All of the questions are just about you. This is the easiest part of the test. I wouldn't say that it's the part that you can ignore or not to worry about, but they're asking about you, so it's really impossible to get the questions wrong. Let's compare that with part 2. Part 1, you can kind of predict what questions are going to come up. You can predict that it's going to be about your work, your study, your hometown, your likes, your dislikes, things about you. Part 2, you can't do that. It's impossible to predict the topic that's going to come up. Describe something you own which is very important to you. You should say where you got it from, how long you had it, what you use it for, and explain why it is important to you. So this is an example of a part 2 question. You won't know the topic. They'll give you a general topic here and then say what you should talk about. And it could be on anything. And you have to speak for up to 2 minutes to monologue about this type of question. Now let's compare that with part 3 type questions. Let's consider first of all how people's values have changed. What kind of things give status to people in your country? What things change since your parents' time? Finally, let's talk about the role of advertising. Do you think advertising influences what people buy? So none of these questions are about you. These questions are about abstract ideas. That's the biggest difference between part 1 and part 3. Part 1 is about you. Part 3 is about ideas. And these are a bit more challenging and you need to develop these a little bit more. But don't worry, we'll show you how to develop it. So 3 sections, 3 different styles of answers. Part 1, normal familiar topics that require a short answer, short in quotation marks. These questions are all about you. You can't get them wrong. Part two, you should be familiar with the vast majority of topics here. None of the part two topics are like so difficult that nobody in the world can understand them. If you are seeing part two topics that you don't understand, it's very likely that you're looking at fake questions. Fake questions are normally really, really difficult. If you look at real questions, then they're normally on topics that the vast majority of people in the world will be able to talk about. Requires you to speak for up to 2 minutes, and this is a monologue, meaning the examiner is not talking to you with a back and forth. You're just talking by yourself for up to 2 minutes. And part three, more abstract questions, questions about ideas. They're not really about you. So we'll look at this in more detail, and we'll look at now strategies for each of these three parts. Okay, so part one, strategy. They're asking about you. Simply tell them the truth. You can't get that wrong. So a lot of people overcomplicate part one and make it more difficult than it needs to be and think the examiners are looking for, some really impressive answer. They're not. They're just asking questions about you. So if they ask you what your job is, tell them what your job is. If they ask you what do you do in your free time, tell them what you do in your free time. If they ask you what's your hometown like, tell them about your hometown. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And if you make it more complicated than that, you're making it more difficult for yourself. And then you're going to suffer with your fluency, your grammar, your pronunciation, and your vocabulary. Imagine you were talking to a friend or a classmate or a colleague. That's the best way to think about this. Just answer the questions naturally. Imagine you were joining an English class for the first time and you're talking to a new person in that English class or someone who you work with. You don't need to talk to the person or you don't need to talk to the examiner like they are some god or some robot or anything like that, because that's not really testing how you are going to talk to people normally. And that's what they're testing. If you move to London or Sydney or Toronto, are you going to be able to talk to people normally? Simply answer the question, and then you can add some extra details or explanations or examples or personal stories. You don't want to give answers that are really short, and you don't want to give answers that are too long either. But don't count sentences. Don't be like some teachers teach students use 3 sentences only or 2 sentences and an example. That's making it more complicated, and you are thinking too much about it. Just answer the question and give a little bit more detail. Give them enough to judge your speaking on. So give the examiner enough to judge your speaking, but not so much that they have to stop you. If you keep talking and talking and talking and talking in part one, the examiner will keep stopping you in the middle of your answer. And you will feel very stressed out about that because you'll think, oh, I've done something wrong. What did I do? I've messed this up. And then you'll start to make more mistakes. So it's a very good thing to learn how to develop your answers, your part one answers, enough, but not too much. So let's look at some examples to help you understand what that is. So again, simply answer the question, explain it, and add some extra details or examples. For most answers, you will not even need a strategy. Simply answer it like you're speaking to a friend, but give a little more detail than normal. That's the best way to answer part one questions. Different for part two, different for part three, but part one, just focus on that. Just focus on communicating clearly with the examiner, not speaking to them like a robot or overthinking. So let's look at an example. So imagine you are a student and they ask you, what are you studying at university? Now, if you were to answer this normally, like if I was talking to you and I said, what are you studying at university? It would be fine to answer the question, I am a I'm studying data analytics. And if you said that, it would be fine because normal human beings, that's how they would answer a question. But in the IELTS test, you need to give a little bit more information. So if the person gave this answer instead, I'm studying data analytics because I think big data is the future and it will help businesses perform better in the years to come. I used to study business management, but once I saw the power of analytics, I switched my degree. So as you can see, this is not a very long answer. It's only 2 sentences, but it is much better than this answer because it gives the examiner a lot more to go on, a lot more to judge your grammar, your vocabulary, your pronunciation, and your fluency and your coherence. So not too short. So this would be too short. This is pretty much perfect, not because of the number of sentences, but just because they answered the question and then they gave a little bit more detail, a more of an explanation of what is happening there. So that's all you really need to know about part one. All right. Part one is not that complicated. It's impossible to get the answers wrong because they're about you. Speak to the examiner like they are a friend or a classmate or a colleague and develop your answers a little bit, but not too much. Okay. So the trickier part is part two. Many students fear part two because they have to speak for a long time, but there's nothing to fear if you master this strategy. So many students will do badly in the speaking test just because of fear and stress. And when you're speaking to them outside of the IELTS test room, they speak very fluently, their grammar is great, their vocabulary is great, and they don't have any problem communicating. But once you put them in front of an examiner, they get really stressed out and everything kind of falls apart. So what we try and do with our students, with our VIP students, is remove that fear, remove that stress, teach them things that will enable them to speak naturally to the examiner on test day. And we're going to give you a strategy that will really help you with this. And the other thing that we do with our students is we identify the common problems. So why do students fail? Why do students not get the scores they need? And then we come up with a strategy that overcomes those common problems. Because if you take away the common problems, you're going to do very, very well. So the main reasons why students don't do well in part two is, so it's important that we understand these so that we can overcome them. Lack of practice. Many people, for the first time they ever do a part two question is in the test. Like any skill, you need to practice this. Not used to speaking for 2 minutes. 2 minutes is really difficult if it's not your native language. It's difficult to speak in a foreign language for 2 minutes. You might not think that 2 minutes is a long time. Try and do it. It's more difficult than you think. Lack of feedback. So if you don't understand what you're doing wrong, then it's really, really difficult to fix those problems. The analogy I always use is if there's a problem with my car, if my car breaks down, I don't know why my car has broken down. I need to take it to a mechanic who will then tell me exactly what's wrong with it and then help me fix it. You need to do the same thing with your speaking and your writing. You need someone to help you with that. And misinformation about the test. There's a lot of bad information about the test, especially part two of the speaking strategy. Some teachers are teaching students that you must talk about the first bullet point for 30 seconds and then the second bullet point for 30 seconds and then the third for 25 seconds. Like, I can't do that, and I'm an IELTS teacher. So how is any student going to be able to do that? So let's have a look at a sample question. Describe something you own which is very important to you. You should say where you got it from, how long you've had it, what you use it for, and explain why it is important to you. So let me explain why most students mess up on the test, on the speaking task 2 test or part 2 test. What they do is they will look at module or bullet point 1 and they will talk about that. Then they'll talk about this, and then they'll talk about this, and then they'll talk about this. Then they'll look at their watch and realize that they've only been speaking for 50 seconds, 55 seconds, something like that. And then it's what else do I talk about? I don't know. Oh God, I failed. This is a big mistake. you should not use this strategy, which is talk about this, then talk about this, then talk about this, then talk about this. You're going to not do as well as you could do if you follow that strategy. Also, following a strategy where you talk about the past, the present, and the future, that doesn't work either, because a lot of students find it difficult to think about things that are related to the past or related to the future, and then they run out of things to say. So what is my strategy? This is a strategy that I share with my VIP students, and my VIP course has resulted in more people at a 7 or above than any other offline or online course in the entire world. So it probably does work. You must talk about the main topic, and you must do this in a fluent way for up to 2 minutes. So what is the main topic? This is the main topic. The bit at the top is the main topic. These are not the main topic, okay? These are just to help you. This bit at the beginning is the main topic. You must talk about this for 2 minutes. However, you do not need to stick to the bullet points, talk about them in order, or even talk about them at all. So you must talk about this. You do not have to talk about these 4 things. You can, if you like. You can talk about some of them. You can talk about none of them. It's totally up to you. But what you must do is talk about this general topic for 2 minutes. Feel free to use them, but do not rely on them. There are many other things you can talk about. So what this does, this strategy, is it gives you freedom. The reason why people don't do very well in part 2 of the speaking test is that they don't have the freedom to talk about whatever they want related to that main topic. They rely too much on the bullet points, and that makes it very, very difficult to do. Here are some other things you could talk about. You could introduce the topic, you could describe the topic, say how you feel about the topic, tell a personal story, use an example, talk about the past, talk about the present, talk about the future, or use the bullet points. So there are so many different things, and these are just a few of them that you could talk about. And you don't have to talk about these in order. You could just pick some. So for example, you might want to say, I want to introduce the topic, then say how I feel about the topic, and then use an example, talk about the future, and then use one of the bullet points. You can do whatever you want as long as you are using that main topic. So for example, let's say you get this. This is your main topic, and you look at the bullet points and you think, where you got it from, I can talk about that, no problem. But then how long you've had it, I don't really know how long I've had it. I can't remember. Okay, I don't want to talk about that one. What you use it for, sure, I can talk about that, no problem. Explain why it is important to you. I don't really feel comfortable talking about that. I don't know really what to say. So I'm only going to use these 2 bullet points. Okay. But I'm also going to talk about a personal story, a description of it, and I'm going to talk about the future. So this gives you much more freedom to just talk about things that you are very comfortable talking about. And this is going to help you speak completely for the 2 minutes, speak fluently, help your pronunciation, help your grammar, help your vocabulary, help absolutely everything by giving you this freedom. And if a teacher tells you that you must talk about each of these bullet points in order, they are wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. All right. So be very, very careful with other teachers who tell you these things. Most IELTS teachers are not actually experts. They're not actually teachers. Most of them don't know what they're talking about. There's some great IELTS teachers out there, and there's some terrible ones out there. You need to be very, very careful. Part 2. So here's the strategy. Look at the question. Decide which of the bullet points you feel comfortable talking about. Add other things you would like to talk about. Make a plan and/or think about your answer. And then speak until the examiner stops you. The examiner will stop you when you get to the 2 minutes or around 2 minutes. So just keep talking, because in the real test, you might think that you have been talking for 2 minutes when really it's not. You haven't really been speaking for 2 minutes. It's only like a minute or so. So just keep going and use all of the bullet points you've made during your plan. You will have 1 minute. Keep talking, and then you will be able to get there. But you must practice this strategy. If you just go in and try and do this on test day, you won't be able to do it. You need to practice this until it becomes natural, and until you can teach it to somebody else, until you can do it without even thinking about it. And if you do that, you will do extremely well in part 2 of the speaking test. So again, it is essential that you practice this before the exam, not once, not twice, multiple times. Once you practice this strategy enough, it will be like riding a bike. Do you have to think about riding a bike? No, you just ride a bike. I'll show you later how you can practice this, and let's move on to part 3. Part 3, in my opinion, is the most difficult part. It's the part that students have the most problems with. Part 1 is about you, so it's not that difficult. Part 2, the topics are normally quite easy, and most students mess up with part 2, but you can fix that pretty easily with the strategy. Part 3 is more of a challenge. It requires you to discuss abstract ideas and develop your answers at length. So you are talking about things that you might not be too familiar with, and you need to develop your answers fully at the same time. So it's quite challenging. Not impossible, but challenging. Do not worry if you get difficult questions. You should be very happy if you get difficult questions. Why? The examiner will ask you more difficult questions if they think you are good. So if they think that you are at band 7, 8, or 9, they will ask you more and more difficult questions in part 3 to stretch you, to test your ability. If they think you're a band 5, they won't ask you any difficult questions, and you're going to be in trouble, because they know already that you're not that good. So take the difficult questions and attempt them, and be very happy that you get them, and give your best possible answer. The key is to attempt the question and do your best. Okay, so typical part 3 questions. Let's consider first of all how people's values have changed. What kind of things give status to people in your country? So this is not about you. They're not asking you what you think, what you do for status or anything like this. It's an abstract question. Have things changed since your parents' time? Do you think advertising influences what people buy? So you can see these are questions about ideas. They're not questions about you. And they're very much like IELTS writing task 2 questions. If you look at writing task 2 questions, these are the type of things that they will ask you. And you can actually use that and use the strategies that you'll learn for task 2 to answer these. You're not going to be, starting off with an introduction or conclusion or anything like that, but many of your answers will look like a main body paragraph from a task 2 question. So part 3 strategy number 1. First thing you need to do is you need to understand the question. The questions are quite difficult. You are under a lot of stress. You're under a lot of pressure. And at this point, you are very tired, because you've been speaking for maybe 10 or more minutes in a foreign language in a very stressful situation. Then you're going to be tired. So you need to understand the question first. Do not be afraid to ask the examiner 2 questions. Could you please repeat the question? What does X mean? What does this word mean? So if you got this question, what are the drawbacks of low-cost air travel, and you didn't understand anything, you can just say, can you please repeat the question? And then if you still didn't understand something, you could say, what does low cost mean? And you'd say, Well, it's a budget airline, an airline that doesn't cost that much money. Like, don't do this for every single question. Like, if they say, "What is your job?" Don't say, what does job mean?" Like, don't do that for every question. But part three, you're going to get questions, or there will be terms that you don't understand. You can ask them these two questions to make sure that you understand the question. Number two, attempt the question. This might sound really obvious, but many people in part three don't attempt the question, or they give a very, very short answer. If you get a difficult question, you should be very happy. Don't laugh or say something like, "That's a difficult question." You would not believe the number of students who just start laughing when they get a difficult question. You wouldn't believe the number of students who say, "That's a difficult question. Let me think about that. I don't know," and just don't give any answer whatsoever. Or some of them start crying. You're not going to get any extra marks if you start crying. So attempt the question to the best of your ability. If you've really no idea, be honest with the examiner. Tell them, instead of laughing or crying or saying, "I don't know," say, "To be honest, I don't really know. I've never heard of this before. But if I had to give an answer, if I had to make a guess, this is what I would think." That is much more impressive than "I don't know," or running out of the exam room. Because, and also remember that you're not being judged on one answer. You're being judged on the whole thing, your whole test, every answer. So if you get one difficult question and you say, "Listen, I don't know much about this, but if I had to guess, and try and give your best answer," that's not the end of, that's not going to result in a band 5. Don't worry about that. And don't be afraid to lie. All right. It is not a honesty test. They will not hook you up to a lie detector. Then, they will not go and check your answers. If you really have no idea and you want to make up a story or just lie, do that. You are not in a job interview. In a job interview, don't lie. In an English test, you're not being judged by your honesty. You're being judged by your speaking ability. So you just want to be able to form sentences, show your pronunciation, show your vocabulary, your grammar. And if that means that you're going to lie, lie. It's better to tell the truth because it's just easier to do that. But if you really have no idea, then you can just make it up. And develop your answer. It is imperative that you fully address the question asked. Think of it as a task 2 IELTS writing question. You need explanations and examples. The examiner must understand your position on the question. You can't just say, "I think this," and then not explain why you think it, or give reasons why you think that, or give examples. You must fully justify your answer. So very simply, answer, explain, example, or a personal story. Don't give personal stories in writing task 2. Speaking, no problem to give personal stories. So answer the question, explain, give an example or a personal story. And you could also, as an added option, you can show the other side of this. So you can say something like, "Well, some people think A, and here's why they think that. Here's an example of why they think that. However, other people think B. Here's why they think that. Here's an example of that. And I think C, or I think A or B." And that just makes it much more developed if you want to show the other side. You won't be able to do that with every single question, but you'll be able to do it with, the majority of them. So let's have a look at an example. Do you think advertising influences what people buy? Yes, it does. Here is why that is true. Here's an example, personal story of why that's true. So this is not the answer that you would give, but this is the strategy. Answer the question, explain why, give an example. Or, no, it doesn't. Here's why, here's an example, and that's it. All right? If you do that, you're going to fully develop your answers. And you can also combine the two above. Some people think yes, some people think no, and then pick a side. Do you think advertising influences what people buy? So here's a full answer. Some people say that it doesn't. It does, because companies spend billions every year on advertising. If it didn't work, they wouldn't spend so much money on it. So this is the answer. This is the explanation. For example, Coca-Cola has billboards and TV advertisements in every country in the world, and most people choose Coke if they want to buy a cola. An example. However, other side. Others would disagree and say that it doesn't influence what people buy, because there are thousands of smaller brands that have no advertising budget and they do just fine. Explanation. I buy all of my clothes from a small charity shop, which obviously doesn't spend too much money on ads. So again, personal story. So you can see what they did. Answered the question, explanation, example. Other side, answered the question, explanation, example. Doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And you'll be able to practice that and pretty much answer, 9 out of 10 questions like that. However, don't stick to one strategy rigidly. Rigid means that you can't change. You can't adapt. You're not flexible. You're going to sound like a robot, and you'll focus more on strategy than actually answering the question. Some part 3 questions, you won't have to think about strategy at all, because it's something you're familiar with or you find it very easy to talk about. Then you're going to be able to do that. So practice answering the question, explaining why that is true, using examples or personal stories, and showing the other side. If you get lots and lots and lots of part 3 questions and you practice that strategy, you will go into the test much more prepared and far more confident and able to answer these questions in part 3. So that was the strategy, and you need to practice all those strategies, but that is just one part of it. Okay. It doesn't matter how good your strategies are if your pronunciation is not good, or your vocabulary is not good, or your grammar is not good. So you'll see a lot of teachers online and on YouTube teaching you that all you have to do is memorize some secret strategy and then you'll get the scores that you need. That's totally wrong. Strategies are helpful, but they are just one part of the puzzle. It doesn't matter how good a strategy is if you're making grammatical errors in every single sentence and your vocabulary is terrible and your pronunciation is so bad that nobody can understand what you're saying. So you need to practice these strategies, but you also need to improve your grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and fluency. And that's what we're going to look at in the rest of this lesson. So you need to do these things and improve these things. You will not get a band 7 if your fluency is not at a band 7, your pronunciation is not at a band 7, your grammar is not at a band 7, and your vocabulary is not at a band 7. Right? Forget about getting a 7 until you get these up to that level. But that's not difficult. With a little bit of practice, knowing what to do, you can get there. So let's look at each of these. Number 1 is fluency. This does not mean speaking quickly, all right? Fluency does not mean speaking really, really, really quickly. You don't get extra marks for speaking quickly. It means speaking naturally without unnatural pausing, hesitation, or repetition. Now, the key word there is unnatural. Everybody pauses when they speak. Everybody hesitates. Everybody, ums and ahs. If you have one or ah, doesn't mean you're going to get a band 5 for fluency. It's about unnatural ums and ahs and pauses and hesitations. Just remember that. So we recently posted a video on our YouTube channel of a girl who got a band 8, and everybody said she said therefore she should get a lower score. It's like, no, you just don't understand what fluency means. Most people have poor fluency for 2 reasons: language and content. So why do you pause? Why do you and ah? It's 2 reasons. Either you're trying to think of the correct language, the correct grammar, the correct vocabulary, or you're trying to think of ideas. So even in your native language, whether you're speaking, Vietnamese, Chinese, Italian, French, doesn't matter. You pause to try and think of the next thing to talk about. And the examiners are looking out more for hesitations related to language rather than hesitations and pauses related to content, because one is about the language, one is totally unrelated to that. So even if you are making some pauses and hesitations, doesn't matter, doesn't mean you're going to get a low score. So think of your brain as a computer, okay? The part that deals with speech and language is just like your operating system. So on your phone, you have your operating system, Windows or iOS or Android. Think about your brain, part of your brain, as software. If there are too many programs open at the same time, your computer is going to slow down. So if you open up your computer and you have 700 tabs open on your Chrome browser, your computer will slow down. It won't work very well. If you go into the speaking test and you're trying to think of ideas and pronunciation and fluency and grammar and vocabulary and everything at the same time, your fluency is going to really, really, really suffer. Okay. And you need to be careful with this. You need to shut down as many programs as possible and don't overthink things. You do not get extra marks for impressive ideas. So why worry about them? There's no task achievement in speaking. There's no extra marks for good ideas. There's no marks for ideas at all. The reason why most people really suffer when it comes to fluency is they're trying to think of impressive ideas. Why are you trying to think of something that doesn't matter and doesn't get you any extra scores? Shut that down. So the simple answer to that is don't overthink your ideas. Part one, it's about you. Just answer it naturally. Part three, just try and think of something that is easy to talk about, not something that will impress the examiner, because you're not impressing them with impressive ideas. Fluency problems, number two, which is related to language. Thinking about grammar and vocabulary will cause fluency problems. The more you think about grammar, the more that you think about vocabulary, your lower your fluency is going to be. There's a direct relationship between the two. The more you think about grammar and vocabulary, the more likely it is that you will have fluency problems. There are two solutions to this. Improve your grammar and vocabulary long term. So think about when you speak your native language. Do you think about tense and complex sentences and idioms and, phrasal verbs? No, you don't do any of that. You just speak because the language has been moved to the part of your brain that is able to just speak automatically. The more you improve your grammar and vocabulary, the better your fluency will become because you don't have to talk about it or think about it. And the second answer is just relax. You are going to make grammar mistakes. You are going to make vocabulary mistakes. Everybody does. Even Band 9 students make small grammar mistakes and small vocabulary mistakes. But if you are constantly thinking about every single little mistake that you're making, then your fluency is going to suffer. So long term, improve your grammar and vocabulary. That will help your fluency. Short term, relax a little bit. Stop thinking so hard and stop worrying about making little mistakes. To get a band 7, you can make quite a few mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Exercise. How are you going to do this? Get a part 2 question. Record yourself doing a 2-minute monologue. First time, focus on grammar and vocabulary. Really, really, really think about grammar and vocabulary. Second time, don't think about grammar and vocabulary at all. Just speak naturally. You will be amazed at the results. The first one, your fluency will be terrible. Second one, your fluency will be excellent, but your grammar and vocabulary will be pretty much the same. All right. You can't improve your grammar and vocabulary by thinking hard about it on test day. You improve your grammar and vocabulary in the weeks, months, and years before your actual test. Pronunciation. There are two main concerns. Can the examiner understand everything you say? Can you use higher level pronunciation features? The number one priority is clarity. Number one, clarity means, can the examiner understand what you are saying? If the examiner does not understand 100% of what you're saying, you cannot get more than a 6. If the examiner can't understand what you're saying, you will not get a 7 or above. So the number one thing you need to focus on is clarity. And this is what you need to focus on when it comes to clarity. These are all the sounds of English. It's called the phonemic chart. Okay? You'll be able to view this online. I'll give you a link now in a moment. But for most people, the reason why their clarity suffers is they have a problem with a few of these sounds. So for example, Japanese students will have a problem with L's and R's. A Vietnamese student will have a problem with th and the. And depending on where you're from, you will have certain problems, certain key sounds that you have an issue with. You need to find out what those sounds are, and then you can use something like this, the signs of speech, where it will show you exactly where to put your tongue, your jaw, your lips, and how to make that sound. And pronunciation is 100% physical. It is about the position of your lips, your mouth, your tongue, your teeth. That's all it is. It's not mental at all. So it's more like going to the gym and training a skill than anything else. But the good thing about it is, if you focus on it, you can improve. Higher level pronunciation features include word stress, sentence stress, intonation, connected speech, and I could make a whole course just on this. I actually have a whole course just on this, included in the VIP course. But for now, I want to give you something for free. Just Google IELTS pronunciation guide. I made this guide, which will teach you everything you need about IELTS pronunciation. It's just called IELTS pronunciation guide. Don't ask me for the link. Just do something yourself and Google it, and you'll be able to improve your pronunciation at home for free. Grammar. You do not get extra marks for using every complex tense or grammar structure. Read that again. You do not get extra marks for using lots and lots and lots of complex tenses and grammar structures. You get extra marks for clearly communicating with the examiner. You should see grammar as a tool that will help you clearly communicate with the examiner, not a trick to help you get extra marks. Okay, a lot of teachers are teaching their students to memorize really complicated tenses and structures and all of these fixed phrases. The examiner knows what you're doing, and you're not doing it very well, I guarantee you. If you just focus on clearly answering the question, clearly communicating with the examiner, grammar is going to take care of itself. There are two things you need to consider: range and accuracy. So let's focus on range first. What do you normally do on the weekend? What did you do last weekend? What's the best thing to do in your hometown on the weekend? What will you do this weekend? How has what people do on the weekend changed in recent years? Should people spend time with their friends or family on the weekend? If you could do anything this weekend, what would you like to do? So, do you notice anything strange about these questions? They're all on the same topic, but they're asking you about different things. Why? Because each of them requires a different grammar structure. What do you normally do on the weekend? Habit, present tense. What did you do last weekend? Past simple. What's the best thing to do in your hometown on the weekend? Superlatives and comparatives. What will you do this weekend? Future tense. How has what people do on the weekend changed in recent years? Perfect tenses. Should people spend time with their friends or family on the weekend? Your opinion. If you could do anything this weekend, what would you like to do? Conditionals. Okay, so the point is range takes care of itself. The examiner will ask you a range of different questions that require you to use a range of different structures. So you don't really need to go in thinking, I need to use lots of different structures. You're going to do that naturally. You will be asked so many different questions. The key is to identify the grammar structure you need to use and then give them to the examiner. Okay, so listen to the question and then think, what grammar structure is the examiner testing here? Accuracy is a much, much, much bigger problem when it comes to grammar. The examiner will be listening to the number of errors you make. The more errors you make, the lower your grammar score. So this is why trying to use really complicated grammar and complicated tenses is a bad idea, because what happens when you try and do something complicated and more difficult? You make lots of errors. If you make lots of errors, you get a low score. So some common errors: articles, prepositions, tenses, countable, uncountable nouns, verb subject agreement, infinitives, complex sentences, conditionals, and relative clauses. What you need to do is you need to figure out what your big problems are. Some of you will have no problem with any of these, but you have a big problem with articles. Some of you will have no problem with articles, but you need to work on your tenses. Some of you will have no problems with any of these, but you really struggle with prepositions. Figure out what your big problem is, or get a teacher to tell you what your big problem is, and then attack that problem. Turn your weaknesses into strengths. It is essential that you reduce the number of errors in your sentences. You should be aiming for more than 50% of your sentences to have no errors at all. If you want a band 7, you need to be aiming for more than 50% of your sentences to have no errors whatsoever. How can you do this? The slow way or the faster way? The slow way, do it yourself. Faster way, get a good teacher to help you with it. Same way as if your car breaks down. Slow way, try and fix your own car. That's a really dumb idea. Faster way, go to a mechanic and get an expert to help you with that. All right. I'm not saying this because I want you to join me or give me money or anything like that. There's no way that I want to work with thousands of people. I can't help thousands of people. I'm not saying this because I want you to give me money. What I'm saying is, I want you to pass the IELTS test. If you want to pass the IELTS test, hire someone to help you with your grammar if you have a problem with your grammar. So the slow way, do it all yourself, listen to your practice sessions, identify your own mistakes, and do your own research and teach yourself. I'm giving you the slow way because many of you have no money, and that is a reality. I know many of you have no money at all. There's no shame in that. I used to have no money whatsoever. This is how you do it yourself for free. But if you have money, a faster way is have a professional listen to you, identify your most common errors, and then learn from a specially designed course and have your progress checked through regular feedback. That's something that we provide, but we don't provide it to many people. We only work with a really, really small number of people. So vocabulary, let's move on to that, our final bit of this lesson. You must use advanced or complex words. Wrong. You must use idioms all the time. Wrong. You cannot repeat any words. Wrong. You should learn lists of academic words or impressive words or high-level words. Wrong again. You should learn lists of words related to common topics. Wrong. So the main reason why people don't do very well in the IELTS test, both reading and writing and speaking, is not because their vocabulary is bad. It's because they believe these myths, these misconceptions. They try and use advanced and complex words and lots of idioms and think that they can never repeat a word, and they learn lists of academic and high-level vocabulary. This is useless, all right? completely useless and it will lower your score. So how do you actually improve your vocabulary? Actively listen and read to English every day. We talked about that yesterday. Note down any new words. Learn them 100% by learning the synonyms, pronunciation, collocations, example sentences, and take risks using your new words and note your mistakes. Treat mistakes as opportunities for improvement and then review these regularly. So what I want to do is give you a vocabulary improvement plan. It is a PDF, it's an ebook that will help you and show you how to improve your vocabulary. We're running out of time, but I really want to help you with your vocabulary. So instead, I'm going to email my vocabulary improvement plan. Do not write your email in the comments. Do not write your email in the comments. Third time, do not write your email in the comments. I have all of your emails and I will email this to you along with the replay of this lesson, okay? Finally, think about what IELTS want you to do. They want you to prove that you will be able to clearly communicate with people in an English-speaking country. Whatever you decide to do, focus on that, and you will be way ahead of 99% of other people. What 99% of other people are doing is they're going onto YouTube, finding a video that claims that they know the secret and the tips and the tricks and the hacks, and they follow that and they fail. All right? Don't do that. Just focus on clearly communicating with the examiner. So how can you practice at home for free? Record yourself doing a full practice test. Use your phone to help you record yourself. You'll find questions at the British Council, IDP, IELTS.org, or Cambridge English. Listen back and think about your performance. Think about your fluency, think about your strategy, think about your coherence, think about your grammar, think about your vocabulary. So what did we learn today? Strategy for each part of the test, how to improve grammar, vocabulary, fluency and coherence and pronunciation, and how to practice at home for free. Tomorrow, we're going to look at writing task 2. See you here at the same time. If you missed any of this lesson, don't worry, I'll email it to you immediately after. It was a pleasure teaching you again, and I'll see you again tomorrow. If I can figure out how to end this lesson.